A question that's been asked more and more in the years since Tupac died is this: did he become a member of the Blood street gang while at Death Row Records? It's well known that Death Row was divided into Crip and Blood factions, with Snoop Dogg and the Dogg Pound being the most high-profile Crips, whilst Watts-based group OFTB and label boss Suge Knight were Bloods. Tupac was inseparable from Suge Knight for the 11 months he was on Death Row, and he even started hanging out with Suge's Blood homeboys, most notably Buntry, Neckbone, Heron, Big Rock and Trey. Tupac also took to yelling MOB on some of his tracks, the name of Suge's particular set of the Bloods, the Mob Piru. Throughout his rap career, Tupac flirted with gang affiliation. He associated with gang members, he wore the coloured bandanas that gang members wore, and he covered his torso in gang-style tattoos. However, prior to signing to Death Row, he never actually took the step of joining a gang, but did this change after signing with Suge's label? Several former artists and staff from Death Row have given their opinions in YouTube interviews over the years on whether Tupac was claiming Mob Piru at the time of his death. For example, producer Kurt Cobain, who actually produced an unreleased track with Tupac called MOB, is on the record as saying that Tupac was indeed a Blood and died gangbanging for the Bloods by leading the attack against Southside Compton Crip Orlando Anderson on the fateful night of September the 7th, 1996, when Tupac was fatally shot. However, Edie, Young Noble and Napoleon, close friends of Tupac's and members of his group the Outlaws, deny Tupac died representing the Bloods and say he was only showing solidarity with his friends when he attacked Anderson. I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. I don't think Tupac was an official member of the Mob Piru. However, I think he revelled in displaying the symbols of gang affiliation and enjoyed paying respect to his gangster friends by wearing their colours, using their slang, and even fighting side by side with them, to the point that he looked like he was a member of the gang himself. The longer he stayed on Death Row, the more comfortable Tupac got with his use of the Blood symbolism, and the final two music videos he made before he was killed, To Live and Die in LA and Toss It Up, contain various nods to the Bloods, which I'm going to discuss in this video. These two tracks, along with Hail Mary, were the three singles from the Machiavelli album, the last album Tupac had creative control over before he was killed. Though Hail Mary was the first single, the video was filmed after Tupac's death, and it's largely forgettable because of his absence. However, fans were pleased to see that Tupac appeared in the videos for the next two singles. Even though he was using the alias Machiavelli for this album, he was front row centre in the videos for To Live and Die in LA and Toss It Up. The main reference to the Bloods in Toss It Up, filmed on September 6th, the day before Tupac was fatally shot, is the predominance of the colour red. A shiny red Dodge Viper is the centrepiece in the garage setting, which Tupac stands in front of in many of his scenes. One of the video chicks wears a red skirt and sits in a red Jeep while talking on the phone, and the other Death Row artist on the track, Danny Boy, is wearing a red shirt underneath his white suit and stands in front of a convertible red Corvette, all signalling the record label's gang ties. Tupac has replaced his omnipresent Death Row chain with his huge euthanasia medallion, which he only received from the jeweller a few days before he was shot, but he holds a burning book of matches to the camera, emblazoned with the Death Row logo as an alternative way to show his allegiance to the label. At the end of the track, Tupac raps, a verbal reference to the Mob Piru and also to the recently renamed New and Untouchable Death Row Records, following Snoop Dogg's acquittal of murder earlier in the year. The renaming was also a supreme example of pride coming before a fall, considering what would happen to Death Row later in 1996. In the video for To Live and Die in LA, shot in July 1996, the visual references to the Bloods are even stronger. It's no coincidence the first few seconds of the video start with a close-up of Tupac's new MOB tattoo on his right tricep. This makes it clear to those in the know that Tupac is shouting out the Mob Piru in this video. Next, we see Tupac riding around LA wearing a red vest and red Dodgers cap. Tupac usually sported a white vest, for example in the California Love remix video, his concert at the House of Blues, and his photo shoot for the Source magazine in March 1996. So his wearing of a red vest and cap stands out as unusual, and it seems like a deliberate choice to make a statement about the Bloods. He even makes a direct reference to gang colours when he raps the lines,
"Better learn about the dress code, B's and C's, all them other suckers copycats, these is G's."
Later in the video we see a picture of the sign for Luders Park in Compton. Luders Park Pyru are the neighbouring blood set to Suge's Mob Pyru. Although now feuding with each other, back in 1996 the two sets were close allies, and several of Suge's crew were members of the Luders Park Pyru, including Heron. The director of To Live and Die in LA, J. Kevin Swain, is on record as saying all of the shots in the video were his own choices, apart from the shots of Compton. So I believe either Suge or Tupac or both requested the shot of Luders Park as a shout out to the Luders Park Pyru. At 2 minutes 48 there is a shot of a logo painted on a wall. It seems to be the logo of a sports team. Its red colour and the fact that it appears when Tupac raps the line,
Gang signs being shown, brother, love your hood, but recognizing it's all good,
makes me suspect it is significant. I haven't been able to confirm this yet, but I think it is probably an old logo used by Compton's Centennial High School for their football team called the Apaches. The logo features scarlet and white, the high school's colours. It contains a large C, possibly for Centennial, and the cartoon figure resembles a Native American, which would fit with the Apache name. If this logo does belong to the Apaches, this would be significant because Centennial High School was the school that students Sylvester Scott and Benson Owens attended in the 1960s. Following an attack by Raymond Washington and other Crips, Scott and Owens founded two of the first Pyru gangs in Compton, which were initially intended to offer members protection from the Crips. If I'm right, the inclusion of Centennial High School's team logo is more than likely an homage to the founders of the Pyrus, and later the Bloods. I'm sure some viewers will know the answer to this question, so I'd love you to tell me in the comments whether my theory is correct or not. Turning to the lyrics again, Tupac does something on this song that he didn't do on any other of his numerous Death Row era tracks that I'm aware of. He shouts out some actual members of the Bloods. He starts with another reference to the Mob Pyru before shouting out Suge. He then mentions some of his label mates, including Snoop Dogg, the Dog Pound and OFTB, the latter being members of the Bounty Hunter Bloods, before shouting out Suge's homeboys.
I got neck bone, hair on, country too. Big rock plus straight, so this one's for you.
Big Rock was Elm Street Pyru, and Heron, as mentioned earlier, was Luders Park Pyru, while Neckbone, Trey and Buntry were all Mob Pyru. These guys were real deal gangbangers, hired by Suge to do various jobs, including artist management and security. They could also be called upon to do dirt for Suge whenever he needed it. They were frequently around the studio, and Tupac had begun to hang out with them. In fact, all of these Bloods, except Big Rock, who was in jail, were with Suge and Tupac the night of September 7th, when Tupac was fatally shot. The story goes that Trey, or Trayvon Lane, spotted Crip Orlando Anderson in the lobby of the MGM casino and whispered into Tupac's ear that was the guy who tried to rob Trey of his Death Row chain in the Lakewood Mall that summer. Tupac, either out of loyalty to people he'd grown to regard as friends, or indebtedness to Suge for bailing him out of jail, or wanting to prove himself to these real deal gangsters, or possibly a combination of all these things, sucker punched Anderson, which started in motion the night's tragic events. Death Row's ex-security boss, Reggie Wright Jr., has claimed in interviews that Trey Lane didn't whisper in Tupac's ear about the presence of Anderson and actually told Suge and the other homeboys instead. However, I can imagine Trey did tell Tupac as a way to test his loyalty and to find out how much Tupac was willing to represent Mob Pyru. My take is that Tupac wasn't an official member of the Bloods and only saw himself as a gang associate. But member or not, he crossed the thin line between rapping and gangbanging by assaulting Crip Orlando Anderson, and unfortunately he paid for it with his life. What do you think? Do you think Tupac had become a member of the Bloods by the time of his death? Or was he merely using the symbolism of the mob pyro to pay respect to the gang members who were at Death Row Records? Let me know in the comments below, and stay tuned for more Tupac content here on this channel.